Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now in Song of the Open Road to passage number 5. You'll maybe recall that we said that some scholars have kind of divisioned up this Song of the Open Road by different sections, and the first section is passage 1 through 5, or certainly, as we made the argument, maybe passage 2 through 5, with passage 1 being kind of an introduction. So we are now coming to kind of the end of the first movement, can we use that term, in Song of the Open Road. Now, our assumptions are that at learnstrong.net, down the left-hand side, Talks with Walt playlist, you've been following our stuff from the very beginning, from the inscription stuff all the way through Open Road, the introductory comments, as well as passages 1 through 4. In terms of some background information here, we have said that we're looking at Whitman from our 5 Ps, and one of those is Whitman as poet. We're also, though, going to add Whitman as priest. This notion of ordaining myself is going to be one of the radical ideas. And I've said to you guys that many times at the early years of Leaves of Grass, this poem was thrown out, not just for its sexual content, but for its radical ideas in regards to religious orthodoxy and theology, and we're going to see some of that here. We're also going to be playing around with echoes. Hey, do you guys remember when we played this game of Song of Myself, passage 14? Just knowing what you know already about Song of the Open Road, remember and hear these lines. He says it this way: the press of my foot to the earth springs 100 affections. They scorn the best I can do to relate them. I am enamored of growing outdoors, of men that live among cattle or taste of the ocean or woods, of the builders and steerers of ships and the wielders of axes and mauls and the driver of horses. I can eat and sleep with them week in and week out. What is commonest, cheapest, nearest, easiest is me, capital M by the way. Me going in for my chances, spending for vast returns, and adorning myself to bestow myself on the first that will take me, not asking the sky to come down to my goodwill, scattering it freely forever. Now, this scattering imagery will be, of course, one of the central ideas of Leaves of Grass. Let's just hear the poem, passage 5. From this hour, I ordain myself loosed of limits and imaginary lines, going where I list, my own master, total and absolute, listening to others, considering well what they say, pausing, searching, receiving, contemplating, gently, but with undeniable will, divesting myself of the holes that would hold me. I inhale great draughts of space. The east and the west are mine. The north and the south are mine. I'm larger, better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness. All seems beautiful to me. I can repeat over to men and women, you have done such good to me. I would do the same to you. I will recruit for myself and you as I go. I will scatter myself among men and women as I go. I will toss a new gladness and roughness among them. Whoever denies me, it shall not trouble me. Whoever accepts me, he or she shall be blessed and shall bless me. Let's just point out right away that here we have Whitman, the priest, giving the blessing. Wow. Now, again, there will be readers of this poem in Whitman's day that are aghast at this kind of thing. They will see this as radical as, of course, Luther's challenge to the church of his day, which is why some have called Whitman the second Luther. That is to say, the challenger to orthodoxy. Now, it is true that Whitman challenges orthodoxy, but I want to point out already in this passage, we're going to see this again in passage 6, that Whitman is not completely over the top with his iconoclasm. He's moderated, and we're going to see this. Notice, he'll begin with immediacy. First it's here, now it's from this hour. Again, afoot and lighthearted I take to the open road. It's now, it's time. From this hour, I ordain myself. Later it's going to be recruit, right? And we'll see again this idea of being able to ordain yourself. Well, this is kind of unusual. Notice, usually somebody ordains you. That is to say, they pass on to you the right to serve as some kind of special person in religious and orthodox language, some kind of overseer or priest or bishop or whatever. He says, I'm going to ordain myself. Notice, loosed, this idea of being loosed, this idea of of being ordained. Go back to Song of Myself, passage 15, in his comment regarding deacons. Go back to Song of Myself, passage 2, and the notion of voices being loosed. Loosed of limits and imaginary lines. Notice they're imaginary lines. In other words, the things that would hold me down are imaginary. And of course, Whitman will make us think immediately of Gulliver's Travels and how Gulliver gets kind of tied down by the Lilliputians. All of that will come to mind. Going where I list, I'm going to go where I want. My own master, total and absolute. This idea of full autonomy. I am ordaining to myself. I am giving to myself the right to go out on the open road. It's an interesting idea. And of course, we'll ask in a bit at 3B, to what degree can you play a game like that, where you're able to say, this is who and what I am. This is how I will live my life. I'm not going to be held down by anybody, right? Going where I list, my own master, total and absolute. And then he says it. Listening to others, go back to passage 1 of Song of Myself, creeds and schools and abeyance. Listening to others, considering well what they say. You'll remember, sufficed is the word of Song of Myself, passage 1. And then, this is why I argue that he's not completely iconoclastic. Whitman never fully argues, just get rid of all the past. Which is why we'll always say about our study of Whitman that the new is the new. The NEW is the KNEW. Notice what he says about the past. And this is going to be, I think, and I hope, the position that we will take in 303 regarding the quote-unquote classics. Any kind of text or art that has come before will say the following about it. Pausing, searching, receiving, the huge one, contemplating. Go back to our discussion of Francis Bacon's of Studies. Notice he did use the word few to talk about the few books that he's going to fully digest, right? Contemplating. If we're doing anything in our talks with Walt, I hope that we're playing that game. In other words, just because he says something, we're not going to completely, immediately just relegate it. Well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm not even considering it. No. We're going to contemplate. We're going to think about it. He continues, gently, I think that's a huge word for Whitman, but with undeniable will. Notice irony here. Gently, and then later it's going to be gladness and roughness. So Whitman's going to play both sides. Yes, he believes in safe spaces, to quote language that's popular today. But of course, he also believes in unsafe spaces. That open road is going to put me in situations where sometimes I'm a little bit, but all of it is done gently. We might say intentionally, right? Gently, but with undeniable will. There it is. And we have said this about Whitman's views of desire and of will. It isn't a matter of desire and will for Whitman. It's a matter of sustainable will. Afoot and lighthearted, I take to the open road. Okay, but can we sustain it? Can we stay on it? And that is this interminable will. This notion that, this undeniable will. This idea that I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. Divesting, only use in all of Leaves of Grass. Divesting myself of the holes that would hold me. Think about his study of Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one peoples to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another. That notion, and go back to my lecture at LearnStrong.net about the Declaration of Independence, that idea of being held by bands. Of course, both Jefferson would understand the language of slavery in this regards of being held by bands, and obviously we're playing the same game here. In other words, slavery is evil no matter who it's happening to, and we can be self-enslaved. No question about it. I'm going to free myself, divesting myself of the holes that would hold me. In other words, free. Back to the earlier section, Free Poem says, free. In other words, I'm going to give myself the right to explore. Now, it's an interesting idea. 3B question. Do you have somebody in your life that taught you early on how to be happy? What are you talking about? Every child knows how to be happy. Boy, oh boy, you just haven't spoken with enough people who will tell you their childhood was not a place where they were taught to be happy. If you have people in your life that taught you how to be happy, if you got people in your life who taught you how to divest those things which hold you down, that say, you can do better. That's a great gift. And he says, that's what I'm going to do. And then we're actually going to get how he does it. Sounding very much like Scented Herbage, an earlier poem in Leaves of Grass. I inhale great draughts of space. That idea of breathing in, the idea that America is the place where you can breathe free, right? He says, the East and the West are mine, and the North and the South are mine. We obviously think of our comments in Salute Amon, right? I am larger, better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness, right? Remember Song of Myself, passage 22, I am not the poet of goodness only, I'm also the poet of wickedness. Remember he said that? But here he comes back to this notion of goodness. All seems beautiful to me. One of the favorite words, of course, in Leaves of Grass. I can repeat over to men and women, and then notice the you is capitalized. That's because this is now back to the dialogue format. You have done such good to me, and I would do the same to you. Notice the second you is not capitalized, right? There is this idea that such good has been done. Again, back to the idea of the priest. Maybe even the messianic ideas are here as well. And then we've got three I wills, right? I will recruit for myself, back to ordained, and you as I go. I will scatter, again back to the passage 14 of Song of Myself that we read at the top of the lecture. I will scatter myself among men and women as I go. Right, this idea that leaves of grass, quite literally leaves, and then of course the idea of seeds and all that. Go back to Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, passage 1, the sonnet 1, right? We talk about that at Learn Strong. I will toss, this is great imagery, right? I will toss a new gladness and roughness among them. It's interesting it's them and not you here, by the way. Whoever, and there's two of them, whoever denies me, it shall not trouble me. It's interesting. Whitman knew he had his antagonizers. He had his nay speakers, those who speak against what he's doing. He said, I'm not worried about you deniers of my project. Whoever accepts me, he or she shall be blessed. We're back to this notion of being ordained, right? And shall bless me. The symbiotic nature, again, of this project. Well, this is compelling stuff, no question, to end the first section at 2a, right? We must learn to transcend our limits is clearly one of the major messages here. Self-forgiveness is also crucial. Notice he says, I'm better than I thought. At 2b, well, the priest-ward picture is a compelling one, no question, in the ways in which he'll play the game of being not just a priest, but as well a sower, a farmer. And of course, those of you who know your biblical references at 3a and the idea of the sower and sowing seed, you're familiar with Christ's parable of that regards, right? So many echoes here, Song of Myself. I'd like to point out, though, at 3a, though, we mentioned Luther, but I'd like to point out St. Augustine in his Confessions. Go back and take a look at our comments that we've given at learnstrong.net about St. Augustine, who's playing some very similar kinds of games in Confessions to the one that's happening here. Of course, Leaves of Grass, as we said, is built so much on the notion of confession and self-confession. Finally, how about at 3b, a way to own a poem like this? How hard is it for you to divest yourself, to forgive yourself, to get those things that are holding you down, to somehow be optimistic, right, when you meet others and other situations? I hope our study of this poem is challenging you to live a life where you're not held down. Thank you.